In this episode of Idea City,
You let your government body know that you don't want shark fin to be sold in Canada, that you're worried about fisheries, you don't want 54 billion pounds of waste happening every year. If enough people let their government know that it has to become an issue, it will. You guys need to start using your government. We need your support. Only a revolution can get us out of this. And I know the word revolution is a bit taboo, but I can't think of another word to describe it.
Idea City, the smartest people, the biggest ideas.
Rob Stewart? Rob, there you are. Come on up. I hope you brought a lot of your video with you. Have you?
But at least.
2 minutes? Okay. Well, Rob's come to the rescue of perhaps the most demonized species on the planet, the killer shark. We've seen the movies. We've grown up with that kind of position in the culture. And I hope you've got that shot of you stroking the belly of the
That'll
shark.
be in there.
All right. Rob Stewart.
Thank you. In the year 2000, I was 20 years old. I had a budding career as a wildlife photographer. I spent 8 months of the year working for the Canadian Wildlife Federation, BBC Wildlife, Geo, all these magazines, traveling the world and photographing animals. And ever since I was a kid, I loved sharks. Sharks were like the last dragons and the last dinosaurs that we have on the planet. They were amazing, and they were also enigmatic. You know, they were tough to get close to, very difficult to understand. We knew very little about them. I met my first shark when I was 9, and instead of being this vicious predator like I was told, the shark was afraid of me. And what that did for me, for a kid who loved the ocean, was it gave me a whole new world to explore. I didn't have to be afraid of the ocean anymore. So when I was 20, I was so excited about taking a photo assignment to the Galapagos Islands in Ecuador. The Galapagos Islands are a UNESCO World Heritage Site. They're one of the 7 underwater wonders of the world. They're the most protected marine reserve on Earth, protected by the Ecuadorian military. And in the Galapagos Islands, hammerhead sharks school in the hundreds. It's a mecca. It's sort of a way station for ocean travelers. Any hammerhead shark in the Western Pacific stops by the Galapagos Islands to feed, to mate, to socialize. They're highly social. So when I arrived in the Galapagos, after spending 3 days to get there, an overnight 160-mile journey to the 2 northernmost islands of Darwin and Wolf, instead of finding sharks in all their majesty underwater, I found 100 kilometers of illegally set fishing lines and hundreds of dead and dying sharks. And this killed me. I loved sharks ever since I was a kid, I told you. So I spent the day photographing all of this atrocity, and then basically spent the next 2 years trying to get the word out there that sharks were being wiped out using magazine articles. I spent $40,000. My entire career as a wildlife photographer was $40,000. I spent it all getting the word out there that sharks were being wiped out using magazines. I set up a nonprofit in the Galapagos Islands with the Charles Darwin Research Station so that anyone reading these articles could donate to put a patrol boat directly at Darwin and Wolf Islands to stop people from poaching sharks. And after 2 years and $40,000, we got $1,300 in donations. People did not care. They didn't care at all. And I realized that what was going on in the oceans is the oceans are out of sight and out of mind. You know, we don't know what goes on in the oceans. We don't see it. We don't understand it. Only a fraction of the planet ever gets to put their face in the water and see what's there. And with sharks as well, we've got Jaws. Jaws came out at a time when we knew nothing about sharks. So in everyone's hearts and minds, the animal portrayed in Jaws became fact, not fiction. Sharks became manhunters. But they're not. If you look at the stats, if you look at the numbers of sharks, every year there's more than 7 billion swimmers swimming in areas where sharks hunt. And 60 to 90 people are bitten by sharks every year with 5 fatalities. That makes sharks some of the least harmful large predators the planet has. And shark diving, one of the safest sports in the world. Sharks do not eat people. If they ate people, the oceans would be terrifying. People would be getting chased out of the water all the time. You couldn't go swimming because sharks would eat you. But they don't. So what I did was, I realized we needed to give people a new impression of sharks. I needed to make people love sharks the way I did, see them through my eyes and see that they're magnificent animals that are beautiful and amazing. So I decided, what if I could make a movie? You know, the motion picture industry, the pinnacle of the human art form. Maybe I could give people a new impression of sharks and make them care for them like they care for pandas and elephants and bears. Elephants kill 200 people a year. But an elephant falls for ivory in Africa, the World Wildlife Fund goes crazy, celebrities fly to Africa. No, we can't do it. Every year, we kill 100 million sharks, and nobody bats an eye. So I decided to make a movie. No experience whatsoever. I went to all my photo agencies and I lied, and I said, I'm going to do my next photo assignment with digital cameras. Took all the money and rented the most expensive, biggest HD cameras I could find. My girlfriend at the time bought me 2 books on how to make movies. And I had 2 movies on my laptop computer, Snatch and Amelie. And my plan was, I knew how to take pretty pictures, so I figured if I could make a pretty underwater movie, like an underwater winged migration or an underwater baraka, I could show people the beauty and majesty of a creature that's been on the planet for 450 million years. An animal that predates the dinosaurs by 150 million years, that survived 5 major extinctions that wiped virtually all life on Earth out. So I went away, jumped on a boat with Sea Shepherd Conservation Society. You might have heard of them. They're battling the whaling fleets in Antarctica. They're battling the seal poaching or seal killing in Canada. Jumped on board with them so that I could get to the most shark-rich waters in the world with 2 of my buddies, my film crew. And I set out to make a movie. 3 weeks into shooting Shark Water, we had no footage of sharks. We were charged with attempted murder. We'd rammed a pirate fishing boat. The Taiwanese mafia was behind it and were after us. And we had to run from Costa Rica while the Coast Guard was chasing us and firing machine guns at us. And this was my attempt at making a shark film. We started filming ourselves to keep ourselves out of prison. And by the time I was done with this 3-month shoot, we had virtually no shark footage. I was $300,000 in debt, but I had a crazy adventure on film of us trying to escape prison, trying to escape mafia rings, trying to escape corruption, which was a huge insight into how much money there is in the exploitation of sharks and these resources instead of the protection of them.
When we come back,
The oceans are totally unregulated. The United Nations states that by 2048, every single fishery in the world will be wiped out. 2048. Most of you will be alive for this. This is a serious, serious problem, considering that the oceans are the realm that gives us life. They're the life support system of our planet.
get the latest Idealist news, presenter information, and watch streaming video at www.ideacityonline.com. Idea City, the smartest people, the biggest ideas.
When I came back, $300,000 in debt, I also had dengue fever, West Nile virus, and tuberculosis. And I had never made a film before, and I was charged with the option of give up on the film or try to find a way to make this film work. So I went to all the film festivals all around the world trying to convince somebody to believe in a 22-year-old kid that never made a film before, never shot a video camera. Eventually, I convinced someone to believe in me. And believe me when I say I've never done anything as hard as making this movie in my entire life, and I couldn't imagine doing it again. But the reason why we stuck it through to the end is that this is important, and I learned how important it is as we go along. Shark populations already have dropped by more than 90% in the last 30 years. Why? For shark fin soup. For shark fin soup, an Asian delicacy, a dish that has no taste. The cartilage is used from the fin to go into the soup. $200 a bowl, up to $400 a pound for shark fin soup. And as you saw in some of the clips, sharks are pulled out of the water, their fins are cut off, and they're thrown back into the ocean to die, wasting 95% of an animal that's been here for 450 million years, shaping ecosystems, shaping the very world that we depend on for survival. 70% of the air, the oxygen that we breathe, comes from life in the oceans that sits below sharks in the food chain. Life in the oceans that's been rebuilt from scratch 5 times under the supervision of sharks. Sharks is a top predator. Imagine if you have a fish tank full of piranhas. You want to put any new animal into that fish tank. That animal has to be piranha tested, right? Any new animal that's come into the oceans for the last 450 million years has needed strategies, behaviors to get away from sharks. Sharks have literally shaped the oceans as we know them. And they've shaped species. They've shaped the very air that we breathe. The oceans regulate climate. They feed most of the planet. Every year, we waste 54 billion pounds of fish, brought out of the ocean, killed, and thrown back into the ocean as bycatch, because they're not the target fish we're looking for. Shrimp fisheries waste 85% of what they bring to the surface is killed and thrown back into the ocean. Fish have tiny little air bladders in their bodies to control their buoyancy underwater. So when you pull a fish from the bottom of the ocean to the surface, those little air bladders explode and all the fish die. 54 billion pounds of fish are wasted every year, while 8 to 20 million people die of starvation. The oceans are totally unregulated. The United Nations states that by 2048, every single fishery in the world will be wiped out. 2048. Most of you will be alive for this. This is a serious, serious problem, considering that the oceans are the realm that gives us life. They're the life support system of our planet. We evolved from the oceans. Life on Earth evolved in the oceans, yet we're destroying it every day in unprecedented ways because you can't see it. And that's what we try to do with Shark Water, is bring you what's happening in the oceans to the public and make people care about it. So Shark Water came out in 2007. It's changed government policy in 4 countries, spawned 6 conservation groups, became one of the biggest documentaries of all time. Yao Ming, the Chinese basketball player, biggest celebrity in the world because of China's support, is helping to release the film in China, and 300 to 500 million people are going to see it. In China, 75% of people don't know shark fin soup has shark in it because the translation in Mandarin is fish wing soup. So we think this is going to be a big thing towards the preservation of sharks. Ever since we've released Shark Water, I've been at all the environmental conferences all around the world. I've been doing talks, and I've met a great deal of people that have pointed out to me that the situation is not just about saving sharks anymore. And what I've realized is there's sharks under Arctic ice. There's sharks in the deepest, darkest trenches of the oceans that if we do succeed in wiping out many of the sharks, they'll be allowed to repopulate the planet someday. It's now an issue of saving humans. Conservation's changed. It's not pandas and trees we need to hug anymore, it's people. If you look at the numbers, by 2048, there won't be one fish left in the ocean. There also won't be any rainforests. There also won't be any coral reefs. All the carbon we put into the atmosphere, we heard yesterday, creates carbonic acid in the oceans and coral reefs can't form. We're destroying the source of life for ourselves. We are part of the environment. We are inseparable from it. Every day you should look at trees and realize that that's something that gives you life. It's not a decoration. So as we've been going through all these conferences, we've tried to figure out what we're going to do next. And we realized that, well, now that we know all we do about what's going on the planet, we need to make the most important film we can. And the next film we're making is one called Rise Again. And it's a film about how humans are going to survive the next 100 years. It's a how-to guide to start a revolution. Because I believe without a revolution, we are in serious trouble. I've been to all the environmental conferences. I was just at the UN Climate Change Conference in Copenhagen, and they've all talked about global warming, what's happening. And they show you the graphs, and the graphs sort of go like this. And they tell you, this is where we're going. And then they tell you, well, we were wrong. It's actually going like that. It's a lot worse than they thought. So by 2048, there'll be 9 or 10 billion people on a planet that scientists think can sustain 2 to 4 billion people. What are we going to do about this? What are we going to do? Humans are not going to survive the next 100 years. We're going to be eating each other. The only question is how many future generations are going to live in lack and starvation and crisis because we've failed to wake up in time. This is the most important issue humanity's ever faced. This is the survival of our species. All the top scientists around the world are saying we're screwed unless we change dramatically. If you look at it, all of our industry, all of our economy, all of our civilization, what we've built is designed upon the destruction of the world we depend on for survival. All of our economy, where does the economy begin? It begins with the environment. Where do you make things from? You make them from the environment. But it's destroying the world we depend on. This can't persist. This has to be turned around. It has to be turned around quickly. We know it. So to do this, I've looked at past revolutions. I've tried to figure out what we've done, how we've turned situations around. Slavery was brought to an end. Women have been given rights. The world has changed dramatically. Whaling has almost been brought to an end. Holes in the ozone layer. These were all revolutions that were led by the people, not by the governments. You heard from Bobby Kennedy, there's trillions of dollars going into the oil industry. We have the biggest battle possible. Conservation isn't subsidized to the tune of trillions of dollars. Exploitation is. So we have a huge adversary here that we've got to battle, and it has to be led by the people. You guys know, governments and corporations are in power for very short periods of time. Their interest is to their shareholders or to their people or to get elected again. So by their very nature, governments and corporations do not have your best interests at heart. They do not have long-term human survival at heart. 2048, what's the world going to look like at 2048? I'm going to be 60-something, 70-something. I don't want to have to, eat my friend. I want a world that can sustain life.
When we come back,
2048, when there's 9 or 10 billion people on the planet, conservative estimates state that, 500, 300 million people are going to be displaced by rising sea levels. You saw what happened in New Orleans. We can't deal with a couple million people displaced. What are we going to do with 500 million people that are displaced?
great ideas are meant to be shared. Join the discussion on Facebook. Idea City, the smartest people, the biggest ideas.
We have a population issue. The big issue boils down to there's too many people consuming too much and wasting too much. We could turn this around. It's not buying a new Toyota Prius that's going to get out of this. It is radical change. It's redesigning what it is to be a civilized human. And that has to start with you guys pushing it, because everything we've built is on a continual pathway towards destruction. If you look at all the major celebrities, a lot of the big groups, George Bush has a 99,000-acre ranch in Paraguay. People that know what's going on have escape plans. Right? I'm trying to find some cheap land somewhere that maybe I can grow vegetables and, have a family or something when all hell breaks loose, because it evidently will. 2048, when there's 9 or 10 billion people on the planet, conservative estimates state that, 500, 300 million people are going to be displaced by rising sea levels. You saw what happened in New Orleans. We can't deal with a couple million people displaced. What are we going to do with 500 million people that are displaced? When you look at the numbers, and you look at the numbers for conservation, there is no reason whatsoever to look at it conservatively. We need to think of the worst case scenario, because that's where we're going. Every estimate scientists have ever made has been an underestimate. We are in a serious, serious state here. Not to mention the pollution that we put into the oceans. We've so polluted the oceans that a lot of the food we're eating is actually poisoning us. What we're doing isn't working. We need to start questioning the way we live, the way we buy. When you purchase things every day, you direct whole economies and whole industries with your dollars. Be conscious of what you're doing. When you're buying seafood, a lot of the seafood you eat is incredibly wasteful. There's a group called Sea Choice who directs you towards responsible fisheries. Not just responsible because they aren't from incredibly destructive fisheries that waste what they bring to the surface, but also ones that stop you from being poisoned. A lot of the sharks, the tuna, all these big fish, not to mention the fact that 90% of all the big fish in the oceans are gone, but the ones that are left are highly toxic, so much so that a beluga whale or an orca washes up on shore anywhere in Canada, it has to be considered toxic waste. This is the issue. Conservation is the issue. Global warming is a part of it, but it is a symptom of the problem. Global warming is happening because of everything else that we're doing, because we're burning too much, because we're using too much. Deforestation accounts for 30% of all the global warming gases in the atmosphere. The automotive industry, everyone thinks buying a Prius is going to save the world. The automotive industry is 8% of the global warming gases we put into the atmosphere. 8. So it's not the car that you drive. It's the way that you live and how you direct your economy and the people that you have in power. You heard what Bobby Kennedy was saying. We could turn this around. We can. We've had huge changes in the past. When people react, when they know it's right and they know it has to happen, they stand up and they fight for something. So our next film, Rise Again, is all about fighting for something. In Shark Water, you got to see me rip around and try to save sharks and get into a heap of trouble. On the next one, we do the same thing, but we're tackling the biggest corporations in the world. The tar sands in Canada. This is one of the most destructive industrial projects in history. And it's happening because of our addiction to oil. You heard from Bobby Kennedy. We could turn this around, but it needs to be turned around by the people. The governments are still giving billions of dollars to the wrong industries. Fisheries are subsidized. Fisheries are subsidized in a huge way. So is the seal hunt in Canada. We're subsidizing industries because of the public's lack of involvement. Governments work if you use them properly. When any government body receives a certain amount of queries about one issue, they have to bring it up in a larger forum. So you, at a provincial level or at a municipal level, if you let your government body know that you don't want shark fin to be sold in Canada, that you're worried about fisheries, you don't want 54 billion pounds of waste happening every year, if enough people let their government know, it'll be brought up on a provincial level, and then it'll be brought up on a federal level, and it has to become an issue. It will. You guys need to start using your government. We need your support. Only a revolution can get us out of this. And I know the word revolution is a bit taboo, but I can't think of another word to describe it. Maybe there'll be another word by the time we're done with it. And hopefully we won't be eating each other and living like they do in the books and the prophecies and The Road. I don't know if you guys have read The Road, but it's a great book. It talks about what's happening after everything's gone to hell. So this is the most serious issue. I implore you, you need to get involved. We're making a film called Rise Again. We need lots of help on it, so get involved with us in that way. And be conscious of what you eat, where you put your dollars, and how you live your life. Nothing is more important than this. There's never been an issue this big, and there's never been an issue that needs your involvement more than this. So everybody, thank you.
That's right. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Take your bow.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Is your documentary out in video yet, or is it just available in the theaters?
Sharkwater's on DVD.
Yeah?
There's Sharkwater books up
All
there
right.
you can buy as well.
The DVD's up there?
Yeah.
Oh,
I don't know if
swell.
the DVD's up there. I've seen the book up there.
Well, I've got it here.
Yeah,
Let me
Rogers On
tell you.
Demand, Blockbuster, anywhere you can get it.
It's
People love it. Won more awards than any other documentary in the last 10 years, so
Yeah.
I think you'll like it.
Yeah, an hour, 21 minutes, really fascinating, brilliant photography. So, if there is to be a revolution, you've played your part in getting things started. Thank you very much, Rob.
Thanks. You know, 4.5 billion years of evolution just happens to culminate in a world that can support human life. It could have gone in any other direction. And, you know, we're now in the midst of the sixth extinction, and us as one species are causing it. And we're going to be part of it unless we change.
That was an award winner. Doing great work.